Leonardo Puglisi. Buongiorno, Leonardo. Hi, how are you?
Good to be here. How are you?
Fine, excellent. Um, I've explained already to our listeners that you are a journalist and founder of this website and news venture called Six News Australia. And you've done all of this and achieved national recognition at the age of 14. But maybe you didn't start at the age of 14. What's the story of Six News?
Yeah, so look, it's a long story, so I'll try to make sure it's as, simple and easy to follow as, possible. I began Six News in not in year six, so I was 11 years old,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was my final year of primary school. Now, it was nothing serious. It wasn't actually even called Six News. It was called HMV, local news, standing for Hawthorn, Melbourne, Victoria. I live in Hawthorn, so it was really just local news, and I guess it was more of a passion project, so it was nothing serious. Then, as you can imagine, first year of high school, year 7, was 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. And so, in about March and April, when you can imagine COVID kind of got took a lot more seriously by many people globally, and of course the lockdowns began. We expanded. We were initially just on YouTube, but by the way, we had rebranded to Six News on the 1st of January 2020. But we expanded to have social media accounts on every platform, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at 6NewsAU. And in May, I managed to make an appearance after just being found, just a bit of a human interest story on Channel 10. And after that, we started getting a bunch of people wanting to join us, and our following grew and our subscriptions grew, and now we're at where we are today, and we have a team of about 10 people on air, off air, based around the country. We also have a US correspondent who's actually in the United States in South
Okay.
Carolina, and we are now a fully fledged serious news outlet. We've interviewed the Prime Minister, the opposition leader, and the Greens leader, as well as dozens of candidates and sitting members, and we're only going to continue to expand. And I guess the one thing I'll say is, while we're not trying to compete with your Channel 10, your ABCs, in the sense that, we can never compete with their TV viewership, that's practically impossible, what we are competing with is their offerings they have digitally. So we can compete with their YouTube channel, we can compete with their Twitter followings, etc. Because we are news made by people growing up in the digital age for the digital age. And I think that's what really makes us different. In addition to, of course, all of us being teenagers or at university age. It's that's one thing, but of course we'll continue to expand, whether I'm 14 or 18, etc. We're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, that's interesting. Well, we'll come back to this, how you managed to do the news while also being at school or at university. But let's go back. Where do you broadcast? You mentioned YouTube earlier. So were you on YouTube Live or were they
Yeah,
recorded
so
YouTubes?
we're not like a 24, well, we provide 24/7 news. We're just not a rolling channel, and that's
Okay.
obviously a logistical thing. It's a bit hard to be, as you can imagine, while you're also doing high school. But we have 4 programs currently. One is our Sunday night bulletin that comes out at 8 p.m, and I'm going to be talking in Eastern Standard Time here, by the way. 8 p.m, where I present it, and it's not like a weekend review program. It's always the latest news, but it's a bit different than what you might see on Channel 7 or 9, etc. We also have Uncensored, which is our interview program, just these unedited interviews, and that's where we interviewed the PM and the opposition leader on. We also have Fact Check, which, as the name describes, we'll just look at misinformation. And then we also have a similar one, Spin Check, which is really just dedicated political news and looking at the stories you might have missed and how the media covers it. So most of them are pre-recorded, and again, that's a logistical thing, but we do have live broadcasts. For example, our election coverage is all totally live, and that is also always streamed on YouTube. And so you can just search 6NewsAU to find us. We're also available with all the programs at our website, which is 6newsau.com.
Okay, excellent. And so you mentioned you've got 10 people, yourself. Obviously, you have to do it part time because you're still at school. How do you manage the time management?
It's a good question. It's one I actually seem to struggle with at times. It was a bit hard, as you can imagine, originally when it was a far smaller team, because it meant I had to do a lot more work. At the same time, though, the year we expanded was, as I mentioned, 2020. So there was a lot of remote learning during that time, and there also was last year. We can't forget. And while remote learning was good in terms of being able to cover stuff more easily, while also still doing schoolwork, I don't want to go back to remote learning. I'll say that. So currently at this stage, a lot of what we post on social media, because I still do a lot of the work, as you can imagine, is scheduled in the morning prior. So I'm not like tweeting and posting during school hours. It all comes out through a nice schedule, which is pretty easy to set up. The rest of our team, we might have meetings in the afternoon and the evening, and it happens with all our interviews. I always say to people who I'm interviewing, you got to do it after 4 p.m. Eastern time, so I'm back from school. So it can be a bit hard, but I'm not failing any classes, I can say that. And also, in regards to our US correspondent, being in the US, he's also able to cover international news overnight, so that really helps. It means we don't have to stay up at like 11 p.m. waiting for the results of some major trial in the United States, or obviously they had their elections in 2020, and they'll also have their midterm elections later this year in, I think, November. So that is a big help. It can still be a bit hard. I haven't really figured out a perfect balance, but it's a lot better than what it was in 2020, I can assure you that.
Okay, and I guess you've been learning along the way. Are you doing any journalism classes, or it's okay? That's better if I switch my microphone on. I, I was talking about learning along the way. Are you taking some journalism classes or media classes at school, or has it just been your knowledge and developing?
Yeah, when it was totally my knowledge initially. We only actually started a media class this year, and that was more focused on things like the editing side of it, not journalism itself. I guess the only thing really related to that was, I would say, English in primary school especially. For example, if we were given the choice to write something fictional or non-fictional, I would choose non-fictional. I might do like a mock newspaper article, and I guess that inspiration came from the templates on Microsoft Word, but we never actually had a dedicated journalism class. We are learning about issues that I do care about and report on. For example, currently in English, we're actually learning about how elections work, and we're doing a whole political unit for the entire term, and you could probably imagine I enjoy that a lot. But no, never actually a dedicated journalism class, and I guess I've kind of learned it just by watching along the way. No one in my family, and I think we might get into the family a bit later, no one in my family's ever been in media or journalism, but somehow, I managed to get into it, and it's kind of weird that I managed to get into it, but I'm not complaining. It seems to be working out well, and a lot of people are definitely enjoying what we do at Six News.
Yeah, and I think we can tell that you're enjoying it. You like the communication, and you have a good voice and good way of expressing yourself. So we'll come back to that in a minute. We need to broadcast some messages from our sponsors. One of my guests earlier in this program just got an award for her art, her design, and she said she'd been inspired, amongst others, by Leonardo da Vinci. So we've got another Leonardo on today, so that's cool, and he's been doing some very...
Named after Da Vinci, by the way, I'll mention that.
Okay, yes, we'll talk about that in a minute. So we were talking about the... how you started Six News, your collaborators, you've got several of them at various levels of schooling, and you have also an American correspondent. Cool. Now, this election campaign, you've been very busy, and you mentioned you've interviewed the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. Just briefly, what is your impression of what's been going on? The big day is tomorrow.
Yeah, it is, and I'm so glad it's over, because this 6 weeks has felt like 6 months, and I am actually in Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer's seat of Kooyong, and so there's a proper national focus on where I live right now. Well, you've got to love that. So many people are mad when I say I'm not going to vote for someone, and of course, and fun fact, by the way,
you're only 14, so you're not allowed.
Of course, and fun fact, if the 2025 election is before November, I still won't be voting at a federal level till 2028. But look, just on that question about impression, look, I guess both leaders we've seen some raw moments from them, and of course, speaking to them, you get a lot of raw moments. We've seen some gaffes from both of them. We've seen some factual inaccuracies. We've also seen some new stuff from them. For example, you had the Prime Minister saying he's a bit of a bulldozer, in his own words there. I mean, and then saying he might change if he's re-elected. At the same time, you've got Albanese trying to be the first Labour Prime Minister since 2013. And for a bit of perspective, that year, 2013, was the year I started primary school. That is the last time we had a federal Labour government, which is a bit extraordinary. So it'll be interesting to see if the federal government can hold on, and then we also have to take into account the impacts independents and minor parties will have. A hung parliament will probably drag out this campaign for maybe another week or so as parties negotiate, and that's going to be an interesting process. But again, while I hate to use that cliche line, the most important poll is on election night. We will actually be live all election night. We will actually have, be on our YouTube channel completely live from 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll also be letting viewers contribute, by the way, I might add that. So anyone who comments will actually be reading out your comments on air, which I like to think's a unique thing. And we're also not going to try to be gimmicky either. We're really just fact-based coverage, which is what we've always promoted, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and that's very inclusive. It's a very good way to bring the public with you and make them part of the news, in fact. So you'll be on YouTube Live. Very, very interesting. Now, okay, we're getting towards the end of the program. So that name, Leonardo, you said, yes, inspired perhaps by Leonardo da Vinci. Puglisi, where does that come from? Sounds like an Italian name. And I must say, actually, by the way, I do follow on Twitter a gentleman called Riccardo Puglisi, who's an economics professor in Italy. So I wonder if there's any relationship there.
Oh, well, look, I'm sure if it's the same surname, you can imagine that there might be a relation. It's funny because he is probably, apart from my dad, he is the only person with the surname Puglisi or Puglisi. I'll pronounce it the right way. I mean, we've always simplified it. With that surname that I actually have ever followed or engaged with. And as soon as I saw him pop up in my feed one day, I'm like, I've got to follow you. There's no way I'm getting another Puglisi commenting on my stuff. Look, the name comes, at least from my perspective, and I can't speak on behalf of all Puglisis, just off Sicily, so on one of the small islands there, and it's probably got a small technical name there, so it's kind of near it. And my grandparents, and I'm talking about my dad's side here, by the way. My mum's side is kind of on all sides of things, mainly like Germany and Europe, but that's a different story. In terms of Puglisi, the first Puglisi in terms of you can almost describe it as your clan. My personal family came almost 100 years ago, which is quite extraordinary. And I think in either June or July will be the exact 100-year anniversary. So we've been here for a while. And my nono, he obviously his name's Len, so he's also there. He's has 4 sons, no daughter, so that's something. But look, and then my dad is Benedict, or he might be called Benedetto by his father. But look, yeah, it's something that I guess I have always, enjoyed. I think the surname, it's a nice one. And I always find it funny to see how many mispronunciations there are of it. I get Puglisi often, Puglisi. There's always I had one that it was something like someone just completely simplified it. They practically gave up. They just went Pugsley. Like, it's a bit unfortunate, and I guess we, in my family at least, have always tried to simplify it to Puglisi, but of course, technically, as you've been pronouncing it, and I thank you for pronouncing it, is Puglisi, and I guess that's something I've never faced, attacks from, but I've always had those, the occasional weird comment about my name, which is always interesting to see, and, but yeah, it's kind of a long family history, and we've been here for a while. And
so 100 years. It can't have been your grandfather that came out 100
years. No, not my grandfather 100 years, but he's the oldest living one here. Okay. So it would be. It would be. He was not been 100 years. He's not that old. But no, he.
So Nonno comes from a little island off of Sicily.
That's right. Yeah, I wish I knew the name off the top of my head. There's a photo downstairs, but look, simplified, we'll just say Sicily. Okay, it's the
Yes,
easiest way
yeah.
to say it. Technically, it's just off, but you consider it part of the Sicily region if you want to
Well,
be
you might have
simplified.
heard of Buongiorno, the journalist Frank. No, Frank is the history professor. Paul Buongiorno. His their family also originates from an island off of Sicily, just a tiny island.
Oh, who knows? Could be the same
That's
one
it.
if we know. It's not it's not a big island. I'll say that.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
put it this way: it can be captured in very high quality. The entire island. It's
Yes.
not that big,
Yeah.
and I wish I had the name off the top of my head. But again, it's really really small. And look, I've never been to Italy. I would love to go sometime. Of course, as you can imagine, there's been a bit of disruption the past 2 years that might have prevented that. I've only ever been overseas once, in fact, over to of all countries, Japan. But yeah, I think it would be nice to go. And I know on one level, in the New South Wales, I think South Coast region, there's a whole group of people where there's so many people named Puglisi,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we were actually meant to go there in 2020, but it was January, and of course, as you would know, that was during those awful Black Summer bushfires. So we had to completely divert our trip, and we missed that. But look, I find it. I've actually, apart from people who are actually directly related to me, not like obviously anyone with the surname Puglisi, you'd probably have a distant relation, very distant. I emphasize. I've actually never met someone in person with that surname, so it's amazing. But it's funny because I always get the occasional message. It's like, oh, do you know, insert the name of my grandparents or insert the
Uh-huh.
name of my uncle here, and I'm always like, yeah, I know them. So not that many here, but look, it's something I would say I'm proud of.
You said you're going to be live on air tomorrow from, did you say 6 p.m.?
6 p.m. That is Australian Eastern Standard Time, so that's
So
5:30 South
brilliant.
Australia, 4 p.m. WA, and we'll probably be live until about midnight Eastern. Because again, if there's that hung parliament, we will just be talking. But we'll be reading out viewer comments. We will have interviewees. We will have guests, and then when at the same time we'll also have our reporters who will be on the ground. We're actually trying to get to one of the political party headquarters too. We might end up being at the Labor headquarters. That's if they give us access to, because even when we have this kind of national recognition, interviewing both major leaders, unfortunately, some of the people who control who gets into these headquarters, they don't let us in because they say, oh, you're not a union member. We can't be. We're
Yeah.
14, 15, 16. I think we're a bit young to be a union member. But look, you'll see it all tomorrow night. It is going to be our biggest production in our history. I'll put it that way. So it's worth tuning in and getting a
On
bit of a new
YouTube.
perspective
So
on
we
YouTube Live.
go to YouTube Live and we look for Six News.
I'd say Six News Australia. You've got to
Six
add
News
the
Australia.
Australia because
Yeah.
there's a bunch of viewers, or just look up Six News AU, no spaces and the numeral. So that should easily find us. We're usually at the top of the page there.
Well, thank you again for coming onto the program, and I'm certainly following you on Twitter, and we're looking forward to see how it progresses. Maybe have some chats from time to time on air.
Absolutely, always happy to chat. Really enjoyed it. Good to
Right.
tell my story, I guess.